how can I actually use AI to automate my data? So in this video, we'll actually explore this idea in a practical example. We'll use n8n to automate some workflow, some data in your document. We'll see how we can work with attachments to download and upload photos, and how to use a little bit of OpenAI magic to change the color of those products. Let me first show you the workflow in action. I have here some templates from our gallery for inventory management. Let's imagine that we are running some e-commerce site. We are selling clothes and we want to basically change the color of one of the clothes to produce a new variant. So here we have just a table with products, colors, and a column that is of type toggle. We'll use this column with switch to simulate a button. Let's say we want to change this color of these trousers to be red and white and little bit of green. Okay, we set the color and now we'll start our workflow. So by pressing this button, I actually invoked the n8n workflow, and in the background it actually goes to my document, downloads this photo, sends this photo with a prompt that I will create next, and sends it to OpenAI and asks OpenAI to just change the color of those trousers to match the color from the description. And once that it's done, photo is actually put back inside the Grist document and set to this record to show me what will be the result. And as you can see, it worked. We have red and white trousers, the status was updated, and we have a new color. We can actually try with other examples like moon and sun. And here, let's start this one, and maybe here let's go Jedi style, just to see if that works for multiple invocation at the same time. So as you can see, the workflow is actually changing the status of this column also to actually indicate me that it is in progress, and I can add some access rules to block these records from being edited while the workflow is in progress. Hopefully that's okay. I'm not very big fan of Star Wars, so I don't know. Okay, so now I will just briefly explain how this document is structured. So we have a normal table with product variants, with some fields that are actually not that important, and a color column. That is just a text column that user can type. We can actually use reference column, reference list column, choice column, and any kind of column that can be basically used in a prompt. And then we have a column where we store our photos. We assume that there is only a single photo for each product, and we have a toggle column. Grist doesn't have a button column or a widget, so we just simulate a button with a switch and simple status column. And how automation works, it basically detects when I'm changing this column from false to true. So basically when I'm toggling this switch, and then it sends the data to n8n, asking n8n workflow to change the photo and change the image on this photo. Then n8n grabs the image from this row, sends it to OpenAI. OpenAI changes this color and puts it back here. And the way to actually trigger the workflow in n8n, which is automation engine, is by setting something that is called webhooks. So webhooks are available on every document in the API section. And here I already configured this webhook here. So a webhook is a way of Grist notifying some external system or about some changes. So you can think of it as a connection of two elements. First is a trigger, so that something has happened inside your document, and the second one is an action. And in our case, the action is actually sending some data to the external system using just regular HTTP requests. So in order to create such webhook, you just need to add a new record here, select an event type. Here we actually want to react on every change in every row. Select a table. In this example, this is a product variant table, and select a ready column and a column that will monitor for change. So this is a little bit outside of scope of this video, but the ready column actually decides whether if the row is empty or not. So when you actually add a row inside Grist, most of the time row is actually added as empty, and then you incrementally use UI to fill it in. So we'll use a ready column to mark the row as being ready for like some automation. And in this scenario, we are actually putting the ready column on the toggle column. So this automation will basically trigger whenever ready column is set to true, and it will only react if the change column is changed. So even if this ready column is set to true and we change something here, it won't send the same request twice or with some other data that we already sent. So this is basically our mechanism to prevent multiple submission of this data to the workflow. Okay, so let's dive in and check how it actually is implemented on n8n side. Here we are actually on n8n editor. I already created, of course, have created this workflow. This is from how it looks like. And a few words about n8n. So n8n is just a platform that allows you to create workflows. And workflows in n8n are just like pipelines that connect various nodes together in order to transform some input to output, and in doing so also triggering some external systems. So each node you can think about each node as just a function that gets some input, in our case JSON data, and produces some output. It's actually changing this data in some way and is producing the same item but a little bit modified. Some of the blocks are actually calling external systems. So in this example we have two blocks that, as you can see, have Grist logo. And those are the blocks that n8n has prepared for us. So this is like done by the n8n developers, and those blocks allow you to call external system, in this case our Grist document, and change some rows or get some rows or delete some rows. We will using it for actually toggling this column back to false and uploading this photo, uploading the photo back to the Grist document and changing back the status changing the value of the status column from working to done. Let me quickly go through all of those blocks, how the flow works. So first we have the trigger. So each workflow starts with a trigger, exactly like in Grist document we have trigger and action. So the first block is also always a trigger, which in our case is a webhook. So a webhook is just an endpoint. You can think of it as just a web page on the internet that just listens for someone to visit it. So whenever Grist document is changed, Grist is visiting this page, so just sending HTTP request there, and as a payload with this request, it actually sends the rows that were changed. Next, we'll need to split out the data. Because if we change multiple rows in a bulk, like or if multiple rows were changed simultaneously, Grist will actually batch this data and send it in a one webhook with a payload being array of all the rows that were changed in the one action. So we need to split this data to not have it as a one item, but as a separate items. That's why we are using this split. Then we are calling Grist to clear the is ready column. So toggle this button off. This is for preventing any additional updates or workflow invocation when something changes back in Grist. Then we are using some basic block that just edits the data, just to prepare some data, so it's much easier to use in other workflow, other nodes. Then we have a sub workflow that we'll talk a little bit in a moment that will download the photo. So download the image actually. Then the image needs to be converted. So this is like a pattern that which I will mention later on, converted to a file. Then this file is sent to OpenAI to change the color. Then we are actually extracting the file of we are actually changing the binary file back to something that API understands. Then we are uploading the image back to the Grist document, and finally we are clearing status, so changing the status column from working to done. Okay, so let's now go deep dive in those blocks. So first block that we have is a trigger. So let me open it up. So as I said, trigger is just an HDA endpoint that Grist document must call and send the record that were changed. And this is the data that is actually sent to the n8n automation tool. So basically this workflow. What we are interested in is the body, the payload, that is actually a record which was changed. And it actually contains all the data, not only those columns that were changed, but the whole row. As you can see, this is sent as an array, so we need to split it up, split it out to multiple items, because this is how workflows work. We just push items through the pipeline through every node. And we are interested here in the attachment ID, which is in this example 56, and the color. And of course, to test the automation, it is very useful to actually pin the data. Here I already pinned the data here, and if you don't pin the data, you will need to basically execute this block every time you want to test something, or you add a new block and you connect to blocks and you just need to see how they work. And when you pin the data, you just pin the output of one of the block, and that n8n doesn't need to execute it like later on. It will just use the data that is already there on the output. So think about like a function. It has some arguments and it produces some output, and pinning is actually replacing this function with the result of this function, so that we don't need to evaluate this function anymore. That way, I already, as you can see, there is this little pin button here that informs us that this data is pinned. In the workflow designer, you can see which blocks have pinned data. So So back in the designer, you can actually see which nodes have the output pinned with some data. So for example, this one and this one. So you basically want to pin data in nodes that are expensive to call. So in here, the expensive node is actually waiting for the webhook because we don't want to go back and forth from Grist to n8n to just test something. And of course, downloading, changing the color, uploading is also the expensive operation that we just don't need to invoke every time when we are doing the tests. Next block is a split out. So as I said, this block is producing the array of items, and we need to split it in multiple items. We can just open it up. It just requires the information where which field actually contains an array, and it will just extract this array and produce outputs as many times as there are actually items. So in our case, we actually have one item, so it will produce only one item. Next is the Grist block to actually clear the status column. So we can actually test it. Let's say we will change this. Well, first of all, we need to disable the webhook so that it won't interfere with our tests. We can disable it by just pressing this toggle. And now you can check how it works. Okay, so I just disabled the workflow and let's see how actually this works. So it will receive from the webhook some some data, and we are interested in the row ID, and it will basically call update row function in this block, in this Grist block. It just needs to have a document ID, which you need to paste it here, like a value, or use a variable. If you are using self-hosted version of n8n, then you have the access to a variable space, so you don't need to hardcode things like table ID, document ID. It also is available in the enterprise plan on the n8n. Here I'm just using the trial version, so I don't have the access to it. So the update function just requires document ID, table ID, row ID, and you just specify which columns you want to update and what value do you want to set. So in our case, we just want to change the toggle column to false and change the status to working. So we can actually execute it because the previous branch was actually pinned. So we have the data. You can see the data, the last item that is in the pipeline. So we can just execute it. And when we execute it, you will just, as the output, we'll see the data that actually was sent from the Grist. So when you go here, you can see that it actually changed it. You can test it once again. And as you can see, it is changed back to working. Next one is a block that I just like to use, and I use very often to clear the data. So to actually extract from the raw records the data that I actually want to use, and to set some like static values. In this example, I'm setting here or adding also, like enriching the item with document ID, column ID that I will use later on, and table ID. This way I'm just using variables without actually paying for variables because I don't have access to it in this way. But this is like a way of simulating this kind of storage, and it allows me in next blocks just to drag and drop those, and I don't need to repeat the doc ID, for example, every time I need to do something with Grist. I also put the doc ID as a reference in this example. Of course, this is just a test document. So we can just try execute it, and in the output we'll see all the values that we are interested in. So we are interested in an attachment ID. This is the ID of a file in Grist, inside the Grist document, and the color. And we have some like static variables that we want to pass along, and of course the record ID, because we will use this record ID to upload the photo back and also download the photo from it. Okay, and now to download photo. So download photo is actually a sub workflow because it involves uh, some native HTTP requests, like raw HTTP requests that are very hard, and they are not so hard, but they are not so straightforward. So unfortunately, n8n doesn't have a dedicated block for downloading attachments. So this block basically simulates it, and we can actually extract it here, download it as an XML file, and then import it in another workflows, and we'll actually share it along with this video. So you can just upload this inside your workflows and just reuse it. We can see how this workflow is built. This is just basically a sub workflow. So as any workflow, it needs a trigger. So it's triggered by actually parent workflow. Then it actually expects document ID, table ID, column ID, and a row ID. So those are the like coordinates, things that we need to know in order to know which photo, which image to download from which cell. And of course, we assume that each cell has only one photo. Then we'll use a Grist document, Grist block to download rows. We will just use the filter by ID column, and we will pass the row ID from the things that we got previously. So we can just put it like this. There is a little exclamation mark that ID column is not supported. This is because when you work with n8n, it tries to help you with specifying all those columns and so on. So we can actually change it to fixed, and when I change it to fixed, it actually shows me what the columns are there in Grist document. But ID, like a column ID, is not a user column, so n8n doesn't see this as a valid value, even though it is actually a valid value, and it is sent alongside with all the data. So to make it happy, we'll just use an expression and just set it to ID, because we know that the ID is there. And we can even try to execute it if the data is pinned, and it's pinned, it should work if the data is correct. So let's try it out. Yes. So as you can see, it was able to get the row from our document, which is probably this one. We can check this out by specifying different color and running it once again. Yes, this is live document. Next, we need to extract attachment ID. So I just like to, as previously, create those blocks that just transforms row JSON to another row JSON, so we can execute it because the data is already there. It's not pinned inside this, but this is like this is still like expensive operation, but it doesn't change anything, so it's almost secure to doesn't cost us that much to invoke it, but of course we can pin the data so that it will work much faster. And as a result, I have just single ID that is called attachment ID. And now I can download the photo. And this is the hardest part actually in this workflow. The changing the image, ironically, is super easy comparing to downloading the file. So this is basically a recipe how to do the download, how to download an attachment from Grist. We can actually try to do it live here, but from high level, you need to construct this URL. So this URL, those parts in black are static, and it just requires a document ID and an attachment ID, which we already have from past nodes. So n8n actually shows you which attachment it is on which document. Then you need to actually use your API key to download the document, because you can't use the Grist credentials that are on the other blocks. So in order to specify those credentials, you need to use a bearer auth, which is like a standard way of doing authentication over HTTP, and pass a header. So I already pre-created these credentials, so you can just store these credentials inside your profile settings and just paste the API key that you get from your document, from your profile, Grist profile here. And n8n will remember it and will just set the proper HTTP headers inside of this request. One thing to remember is that you need to specify what is the expected output. So expected output is a file, and you want to put it into data field. So this is like a n8n way of moving binary files across nodes. So each binary file is put under a field, and this is what we want to have. So when we execute it, we'll have the item is actually moved as without changing, but there is also a data, which is actually a photo that this workflow downloaded, and we can just see the photo here. Okay. And once we have downloaded the photo, we need to put this photo back into parent workflow. n8n doesn't support it out of the box, so workflow and sub-workflow can't share binary data, but fortunately we can just convert the binary data to a string, like base 64 encoded string. And if this is just a text, we can safely pass it out to the parent workflow and decode it back then. So this is like a pattern that people are using in order to use shared components that downloads or uploads files. Okay, now let's go back to the main workflow. So this is the main workflow, and we were, just to recap, we're at this moment of downloading the photo, which has pinned data already. So to recap, it actually converted the doc ID, table ID, column ID, and the row ID into a base 46 encoded file. And then what we are doing, we are converting it back to the actual binary data. We can, because the data is pinned, we can just execute this step and see what was stored here. And then we are using change color block from n8n. So you can find it in the AI section. Somewhere here we will have change color. So there are, actually, you can see a lot of AI things, so you can just maybe open AI. And you can see edit image. So this is the block that I was using. So I will show you how it's configured. So first of all, you need to have your own API key, open API key. Unfortunately, you can't use the n8n free allowance because they only allow you to call ChatGPT or like text-based models. So in order to use like the graphic ones models, like here I'm using GPT image 1, you need to have your own API key, even if I think free key is fine. And then you just select the operation that is edit image. You just select the model. There are two models, Dolly and the GPT image 1. GPT image 1 is the one that I was using previously, so it's very easy to set up. And then you generate a prompt. So prompt is very, very easy. Change the color of these clothes too, and I'm just pasting the color that I get from the record. And I'm passing the binary data in and passing binary data out. So those are the names of the files that are in the workflow. So I'm just overwriting the one data from another, one file with another, the one that I got from the input to the one that will be generated by this block. And of course, I need to specify some properties that can be then that the model expects. I'm using here the default one. I'm not changing here anything. So yes, so that's it. And once the color is changed, after this block, we will have the image file, like a binary file that is stored on as the data field inside the workflow. What we are doing, we are changing this back to a string, which is also like built-in extract built-in block from n8n, which just moves files to a base 64 string. And then we are calling another sub workflow that we prepared for you so that you don't need to figure out how that works, which is basically copy of the download endpoint. It just accepts the same set of data: document ID, tablet ID, column ID, row ID, and a file, which is a string. Then it converts this file to a binary data, uploads this image to Grist using the same endpoint, but this time post method. It's very one thing that is not so straightforward. You need to specify additional header inside the request, so you can just reuse this block that we will share, which already has it embedded, that to mark that this is a valid request, like from a valid client. This is a precaution that Grist has in order to avoid some script injection attacks. And once the image is uploaded and set inside the uploaded to the document, then you need to put this image as an attachment inside the cell. So this is just a regular Grist node that just updates row. It expects document ID, table ID, row ID, and column name and value. So a value, so I will maybe talk a little bit more about value. So attachments inside Grist are stored as an JSON array with first element being capital L. This is the way we encode lists. So you just need to use this expression and pass the body of the JSON that was uploaded previously in this parameter. And that's all. So this subblock will basically upload the image. By uploading the image will return the attachment ID, so the file that is actually stored inside the document, which is not yet added to a cell. So Grist actually has a dedicated storage for attachments that can be shared across multiple cells if you copy one attachment to another cell. And after you uploaded the image, the attachment, you need to actually paste it inside the cell. So this is what it does. And this payload will be the things that the upload image attachment endpoint will return. We can actually execute it and see if the pin data works. Let's do it. So this executed successfully. This executed also successfully. But it actually the data is not there for testing, so I actually set some dummy data there. Then I will upload this, and as a result I will have an attachment ID. Okay, so here I will just execute this workflow. So there is actually pinned data that comes in from the trigger, and we can just press the execute button and it will just upload this photo and we can see what it is. It actually is dummy data that I just put there as a test. Going back to the main workflow. So after uploading the image to inside Grist and setting the attachment on the cell, we are just clearing the status. So this is regular n8n block to connect with Grist, and I'm using the operation update row. I'm specifying document ID, template ID, row ID, which column I want to change, and what is the value. So when I can execute it, hopefully every thing is done previously. Unfortunately, as you can see, I haven't pinned the color change data. So now n8n will actually execute the workflow from the beginning, from the last pin data to this point. So we need to wait a little bit for the photo to be changed. And as you can see, it executed successfully from here to here. And it is still using the pin data from the sub workflow. Okay, so as a recap, we are waiting for a webhook to be triggered from Grist document. Then we are just splitting out the data from list to individual items. We are clearing the toggle to simulate that the button was clicked. We are preparing some data, then we are getting the image from the attachment column from that row, sending it to an OpenAI with a prompt. Please change the color of this image, of the clothes inside this image. Then we are uploading it back as an attachment to a cell and just cleaning the status. Let's unpin the data from probably here and from here and from here. Okay, so no data is pinned, only the first one, and execute it once more time. And we expect, if I'm correct, blue data. Okay. And I will maybe show you also how you can test it yourself when you, in the meantime, when this is going. While you're actually on the editor, n8n exposes two endpoints. One is a production, which is a live endpoint that it will be always on, and one is a test endpoint. And this test endpoint is only available when you click this button. So that's why during tests you can actually check if the trigger is invoked just by pasting this URL. As you can see, that worked. It actually changed to a blue because that is the data that we have pinned here. And you can change the URL here. So right now it is actually connected to a production endpoint, but you can just put the test endpoint here and test the webhook this way. We can run it once more time. Okay, so this is it. To wrap it up, I showed you how to actually connect with Grist with n8n to change the data, download some attachments, modify those attachments using some AI magic, and upload it once again back to Grist. Of course, there are a lot of more blogs involving AI available for you, so you don't need to be an expert. As you can see, the prompt for changing the color on the clothes was super easy. You can do a lot of things, like even generating videos, but doing like a summary, just reading files and summarizing the files, creating draft emails, or even sending them. So there are a lot of possibilities that n8n allows us to do, and we can manage it all through Grist document. Thank you.